I will not dare to assume that I am even remotely capable of understanding what goes on in the mind of someone with godlike writerly ability. But if we gaze upon their works with a proper amount of pious contrition, we just might be able to extract some nuggets of wisdom that can aid us mere mortals in our writing pursuits. Does anyone else find the word nugget to be upsetting no matter the context it's used in? I've been giving some thought to these sorts of things that separate us mortal writers from the literary greats of the world. And I've come up with a list of 5 things that those great writers do that we should perhaps start doing too. Alright, thing number 1 that great writers do that us mere mortal writers do not do. They write everything with intention. There's a somewhat common idea out there that to write a great novel, you should just copy what other great novels do. And that is a good strategy, but there's some important points you have to think about. The reason why something is done is as important as the thing that you're doing. I did this in medical school all the time, and that's why they kicked me out on the second day of my surgery rotation. It's not enough to just look at what other people are doing and do the things that they're doing. You have to understand the reasons behind it. An example of this is something like prologues. Now, a lot of readers don't like prologues because they usually delay the start of the story. A lot of writers go overboard on dumping a bunch of character backstory or world building stuff in them, and prologues also tend to be kind of confusing. So a lot of people will caution against the use of prologues for these very reasons. When you see a lot of great novels have a prologue and you think, my novel should have a prologue too, and ignore all the advice against prologues or all the advice about how to make a prologue work, that's where you run into problems. If you don't understand why those popular novels have a prologue and what the authors are doing with their prologue, it's unlikely that yours will work as well as theirs. And this applies to all kinds of different things, from how they approach the scene to how they structure the plot to even how they write individual sentences. Great authors have a reason behind everything that ends up in their story. They don't put stuff in because someone else did or because their plot structure says they need to. Everything has a reason, and everything contributes to the story in some way. All right, thing number 2 that may bring you to godlike levels of writing immortality: biasing towards conflict. Your characters should never do or say the thing that makes their lives easier. The actions they take should always lead to more conflict in the story. This is maybe less true for literary work versus genre work, and even some genre work tries to not have a lot of conflict. But I would say most of the time, for most stories, more conflict is usually better. An extreme case of this is something like this series, A Series of Unfortunate Events. That's really hard to say. This is a series where things just get steadily worse for the characters, and every action they take generally leads to further conflict. I mean, the title literally implies that. Now, you can take this too far. If characters are constantly making wrong decisions or deliberately saying stuff that obviously is just meant to inflame situations, then the reader will see the author's hand and it will ruin the effect. Kavoth, the protagonist from The Name of the Wind by Pat Rothfuss, is an example of this sort of situation. A lot of the problems that he gets into are of his own making. It's either because his ego or he overestimates his abilities, things like that. Those cause a lot of the problems that he gets into, or a lot of the time is just kind of bad luck. Now, The Name of the Wind is a great novel, but I've seen people dislike Kavoth as a character because of his propensity to stick his foot in his mouth and bring trouble of his own making. A lot of people feel like he's doing things just to accelerate or increase the conflict, and that is not always a great thing. So it is definitely a balance, but making things harder for your characters by adding more conflict is usually a good move. And I would say that a lot of great writers have a focus on adding in as much conflict to their stories as they possibly can. You're probably wondering why there's a cheese grater here. Well, I think it would be great if you subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, as you'll get more videos like this one. Next up, thing number 3 that great writers do that us amateur mortal writers don't do: they focus on emotions and reader engagement. There's this saying in military stuff that amateurs focus on strategy and tactics and professionals focus on logistics and supply. The idea being that you can have really great tactics, but if your army runs out of bullets or food or toilet paper, then it really doesn't matter how good your strategy is. The same sort of idea applies to writing. You can have a great plot, a great setting, really great characters, but if you fail to engage the reader on an emotional level, then you won't have a great novel. If you hit all the plot beats and you have all sorts of quippy dialogue and you've crafted an amazing world, but the reader isn't curious or angry or anxious about the plight of the characters, then they aren't going to care and your novel isn't going to be that great. The delivery of the elements of the story is what really matters. A story should be plotted not in terms of what events need to happen, but in terms of what you want the reader to feel, what you want their experience of those events to be. Something like Brave New World, which at its core is a description of a dystopian world and a warning about a possible future. A novel like that works not just because the author lays out a logical potential path for humanity, but because he engages the reader emotionally in how it's described. Small little elements that are designed to make you feel a certain way at certain points in the story. All of these little things about making the reader feel certain things at certain times don't detract from the world that he's built. In fact, it enhances it. Engaging the reader emotionally will allow you to deliver your plot, characters, and setting in a more effective way, and that's something that great authors focus on all the time. Next up, thing number 4 that great authors do that not great authors don't do: they focus on scenes rather than novels. The way you eat an elephant is with barbecue sauce, and also one bite at a time. The way you read a novel is one scene at a time. The barbecue sauce is optional. There's a tendency, probably not intentional, with a lot of writers where you dump all of the exposition and premise at the start of the novel, then you delay things through the middle until you get to the end and have the payoff. Hey, that's not a great way to go about writing a novel. A novel is just not about the destination, it's also about the journey. And no, I didn't mean to say a Stormlight Archive thing there. There's a stock piece of writing advice that says that you should take every scene and try to figure out how you could make it someone's favorite scene or why someone would think of it as their favorite scene. Not every scene in your novel is going to be amazing, earth-shattering, or life-changing for the reader, but there should be at least something endearing about it. Great novels do this. They're engaging and interesting at every single point throughout. Yes, there are more engaging and less engaging parts, but there's always a focus on how you can make the moment-to-moment reading of the novel as enjoyable as possible, and this is something that great authors focus on. And the last thing, separating the best from the rest: awareness. This one is a little bit more abstract than the other things that I've talked about, and a lot of the other problems I've talked about can basically boil down to awareness. Any deficit that you have in the quality of your writing ultimately comes down to a lack of awareness. A lack of awareness about how to identify and fix the problem. When a pro writer writes a paragraph, they are aware of the effect that different approaches are going to have. They can perceive what results a certain sentence is going to create. They understand what problems are going to happen down the line if they have a character say something or if a specific event happens. If you write a bad novel, it's often because you aren't aware of the problems within it. You might feel that something is wrong, but you also might lack the awareness to know what is wrong, much less how to fix it. Ultimately, when you boil it right down, the reason that your writing isn't as good as you want it to be is you're not aware of how to make it better. That sounds really simplistic, but it's an important point to consider. A lot of this gets developed unconsciously. You'll develop a feeling and you'll start to feel what's the right way to do something. Gaining knowledge about writing is the first step, but awareness really comes through application. You can learn that a tomato is a fruit, but experience is probably the best way to learn not to put it in a fruit salad. Great authors have developed and honed this sense of awareness. They're able to perceive and understand why certain pieces of writing work, why approaching certain scenes in certain ways will work versus other ways. This awareness is something that you can only develop through experience and actively, consciously working to improve your work, which is something that obviously a lot of great authors have spent a lot of time doing. Just like you spent a lot of time watching this video, which I'm grateful for. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this video and found the advice in it useful. It would be great if you would leave a comment down below if you have any thoughts about anything I said in this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.